The article I chose for my presentation is Teachers' Assessment of ESL Students in Mainstream Classes, Challenges, Strategies, and Decision-Making by Terry Milnes and Li-Ying Cheng. I chose this article because I teach ESL EAL students who are learning English through the content area, and I was interested in how regular and mainstream teachers develop assessment strategies to meet the needs of the EAL learner. Background information: Statistics Canada revealed that in 2002 almost 46% of immigrants to Canada did not speak English or French as a first language. Urban schools are being transformed, and policy documents in Ontario instruct teachers to make appropriate modifications to teaching, learning, and evaluation strategies for EAL learners. Literature review. There has been little research studies conducted in how high school teachers modify instruction and assessment practices in Canada. More research has been conducted in the United Kingdom, Australia, and Hong Kong in the context of English as additional language or second language. In the high school context, research studies were done by Chang, Rogers, and Yu 2004, and Chang, Rogers, and Wang 2008, and Aradisi in 2007. On the basis of interviews with teachers from Virginia, most of whom taught at the high school level, McMillan and Nash 2000 characterized classroom assessment practice as individualized and idiosyncratic. These studies were based on the lack of Canadian-based research in high school setting. The focus of the study was on assessment-related practices of 7 high school teachers whose mainstream classes included ESL students. The assessment research literature suggests that marks awarded by classroom teachers reflect a mix of achievement and non-achievement measures. ESL students in mainstream classrooms. Literature relating to the presence of ESL students in mainstream classes has suggested that some teachers view subject-related content mastery and second language development as separate processes, with the latter seen as the responsibility of ESL specialist teachers. Roos and Fix 2000 found similar findings, indicating that teachers in the mainstream classrooms felt intimidated by the task of developing strategies of benefit to ESL students. Mainstream teachers who had limited contact with ESL students had low expectations, in contrast to teachers who collaborated with the principal and ESL specialists, as these teachers expressed confidence with their ability to work with ESL students. However, even though the teachers were comfortable having ESL students in their mainstream classrooms, they did not know about specific instructional and assessment strategies that might benefit the ESL student. The theoretical framework for this study was research relating to teachers' classroom assessment practices and studies relating to ESL students in mainstream classrooms. Research into classroom assessment practices suggests that there is a divergence between approaches recommended by measurement specialists and those actually used by classroom teachers. A success bias was built into teachers' assessment practices. Final grades of their students appeared to represent a combination of formal and informal achievement measures, as well as non-achievement factors. Burkhardt, 1994, reviewed a number of earlier studies, finding that teachers often considered effort and ability as well as achievement when assigning grades, that elementary school teachers emphasize observation and informal measures of achievement, in contrast to high school teachers' tendency to rely on written measures of achievement, and that there was a variation in teachers' grading practices. McMillan, 2001, identified academic enablers, which included effort, ability, improvement, and participation, which, along with achievement, external benchmarks, extra credit work, were considered as borderline cases as distinct components of teachers' grades in middle and high schools in Virginia. The research questions for this study were: first, how do high school teachers assess the written work of ESL versus non-ESL students in mainstream classes? Secondly, what relative weights do teachers of mainstream classes assign to achievement and non-achievement factors when assessing the written work of ESL students? And third, how does this compare with the weighing of achievement and non-achievement factors assigned by the same teachers when they assess the written work of non-ESL students? Methodology. The research questions were investigated through the naturalistic inquiry. Data was collected through the use of in-depth interviews guided by a list of questions reflecting both research literature and the research questions underpinning the study. The interviews were semi-structured, which allowed for the participants to elaborate on their attitudes and experiences. Research site and participants. The research site was a private school in Ontario in which 1/3 of the population were international students from Hong Kong, Korea, Japan, Taiwan, Indonesia, Venezuela, Mexico, and Germany. This study focused on assessment practices of teachers of mainstream classes, therefore did not include ESL or FSL teachers. All participants had at least 1 year teaching experience in the Ontario private school and had made assessment decisions for both ESL and non-ESL students. Teachers of mainstream classes during the academic year 2003 to 2004 therefore formed a convenient sample for the purpose of this study, and all were invited to participate. 2 female and 5 male teachers agreed to participate. Collectively, the participants reported assessing a variety of types of written work by students, including lab reports, expository paragraphs and essays, projects, research reports, letters, tests, and examinations. Data collection and analysis. Individual interviews with each of the participants were conducted from August to October 2004. These interviews were approximately 1 hour in length and were audio taped. The interviews were relaxed, with participants discussing their assessments and related experiences at some length. The interview was conducted by one researcher who generated field notes after each interview. Interviews were transcribed verbatim, segmented, and labeled according to data analysis procedures outlined by Macmillan and Schumacher 2001. Data analysis involved an itinerant process of examining the collected data segments, field notes, and interview transcripts, grouping topics into categories and subcategories, and identifying themes in the participants' comments. The themes were used to build a portrait of the assessment-related practices that participants reported using at OPS. The following is the participants' assessment approaches. Teachers that are listed: Ross taught history and civics. His non-achievement factors were homework and class participation, and adjustments to assessments for ESL students was interpreting test answers. Eric, he taught math, careers, business, information, and technology. His non-achievement factors were effort, all grades, homework completion for grade 9 and 10. And he's lowering the style expectations relative to non-ESL students. Douglas, who taught English, had no non-achievement factors, and he did not make any adjustments in assessment for ESL students. Anton taught English, his effort, and class participation, and used marks to reward small steps in progress. Faith, who taught biology, science, and geography, her non-achievement assessment factors, homework, and class participation, and substituting effort for class participation, allowing extra time to complete homework assignments, and interpreting test answers were her adjustments in assessment for ESL. William, history and careers, effort when history and careers, class participation, and careers only, rewarding growth and effort through marks, lowering style expectations relative to non-ESL students. Maria, for health and physical education and health education component, just effort, and in adjustment and assessment was in health education component, adapting assignments and interpreting test answers. Findings and discussions. The first research questions. How do high school teachers assess the written work of ESL versus non-ESL in mainstream classes? A distinction emerged from the data between the participants' views of ESL students and the writings these students produced. Each participant readily outlined characteristics of good writing for the subject area in which he or she taught. However, the written work submitted by ESL students often fell short of the participants' expectations with respect to writing style. One question raised by Eric was, do we mark the work ESL students produce, or do we mark the learning? He responded by saying that he would mark the learning and growth processes in which he viewed most of his ESL learners as actively engaged. Maria said the writing skills of both the ESL learner and non-ESL learner were generally weaker than she expected. The participants respected the ESL learners in their classes, but at the same time identified a number of assessment-related issues relating to this cohort of students. Differentiated assessment approaches. Question 2. What relative weights do teachers of mainstream classes assign to achievement and non-achievement factors when assessing the written work of ESL students? Douglas adhered strictly to a rubric criteria when assessing, and as a result, ESL students scored lower than non-ESL students in his class. Based on their awareness of challenges faced by ESL students who are acquiring a new language in addition to subject-specific content, Eric and William lowered their expectations of style when assessing the written work of ESL students. Ross, Faith, and Maria alluded to interpreting test and examination answers written by ESL students, searching for evidence of ESL students' understanding of curriculum concepts. In spite of adjustments in the assessment strategies adopted by most of the participants, ESL students were nonetheless perceived to remain at a disadvantage relative to their non-ESL peers. The third research question was, how does this compare with the weighting of achievement and non-achievement factors assigned by the same teachers when they assess written work of non-ESL students? The results of this study reflected a mix of achievement and non-achievement measures with the exception of Douglas. The marks for both ESL and non-ESL students in Ross's history and civics classes included components for effort, participation in class discussion, and homework completion. Ross's colleagues included the following non-achievement elements for ESL and non-ESL students when grading assignments or arriving at term and final marks. However, because the participants generally used a case-by-case approach to assessment decision, they did not quantify the effect of non-achievement factors on report card marks. However, Douglas was the exception because the effect of the non-achievement factors on students' marks was positive due to the fact that students' marks were bumped up. This is consistent with the success bias referred to by Chex, McMillan, and Nash. During the research, a theme emerged that participants generally valued and rewarded the non-achievement factor of effort more than any other. Some of the participants had reported that effort might influence the marks if this meant a pass or fail mark for a student just below 50%. The potentially multifaceted nature of the construct of effort was underscored in the study by the variety of indicators of student effort as referred by the participants. These findings suggest that research into the role of effort in teachers' assessment decisions will need acknowledgement for the complex nature of the construct of effort. Many of the participants reported that they felt varying degrees of stress due to the complex nature of assessing ESL students' written work, and teachers might apply differentiated measures to different groups of students. This finding suggests that teachers may find it difficult to set aside their knowledge of individual students and become impartial judges of achievement. Some limitations of this study should be noted, including the fact that the participants' assessment practices were self-reported and were elicited through one-time interviews. The number of participants were small and part of a privileged private school that offered small classes, tutoring opportunities, and the focus was on post-secondary preparation. The participants were prompted to discuss their assessment approaches in terms of two broad categories of students, ESL and non-ESL students. This study was done before Ontario government implemented the Many Roots, Many Voices document in 2005. Conclusion: this study revealed that there were discernible differences in how all but one participant in this study reported the assessment of written work, and this suggested a need for further research study. Marks based on achievement and non-achievement factors for ESL versus non-ESL varied among the participants for students in the same class. The separation of achievement and non-achievement on report card in Ontario can be confusing to parents, especially the parents of ESL students who are not used to marks based solely on achievement. A second issue raised in this study is the need for professional development for mainstream teachers who have ESL students in their classes. Many of the participants said that they valued growth, such as growth in the mastery of the subject content, along with the growth in language development. Finally, the teachers at the OPS were dedicated teachers